Love was never meant to be a transaction. It was never supposed to be something you earned with perfection, silence, or sacrifice. But somewhere along the way, something fundamental shifted. Love became a bargaining chip, approval became a scorecard, and attachment became a performance. From a young age, we were taught that love is conditional, even if no one said it out loud. We felt it in the withdrawn warmth when we failed to please. We saw it in the praise that came only when we achieved. We learned to shape ourselves, our words, our needs, our very being, to match what others expected of us. And so we internalized the lie. You are lovable only if you behave. You are worthy only if you don't make waves. You are safe only if you stay small, agreeable, predictable. Love became something you perform for, not something you rest in. We became shapeshifters, hyper-attuned to the moods and expectations of others, quick to suppress the messy parts of ourselves, quick to trade truth for peace. We dimmed ourselves to be digestible. We abandoned authenticity for attachment because we thought the two couldn't coexist. And the tragedy is that many of us still live this way, performing instead of connecting. Sacrificing presence for perfection, mistaking being needed for being loved. We believe we must earn our place in people's hearts by being useful, agreeable, selfless, silent. We learn to love in ways that mirror our trauma, with hypervigilance, with anxiety, with performance, and the cost is staggering because in trying to be what others need, we lose who we are. But love was never meant to be a test. It was never meant to be conditional on how little you need, how quiet you stay, or how easy you are to hold. Love, in its true form, is not earned. It is recognized. It is not negotiated. It is given. And it does not punish your truth. It meets it. But in a culture obsessed with control, with image, with conditionality, unconditional love feels threatening. It feels too vulnerable, too uncertain, too wild. So we cling to what's familiar. Conditional affection, performance-based worth, and we convince ourselves it's better to be half-loved than not loved at all. But what if that belief is the root of our disconnection? What if we've spent our lives chasing love that only loved us when we were quiet? And what if the greatest betrayal wasn't that others couldn't love our truth, but that we learned to hide it before anyone even asked us to? Conditional love doesn't teach you how to love. It teaches you how to perform. It trains you to be alert, not to your truth, but to others' expectations. It sharpens your instincts, not for connection, but for survival. You scan faces, you adjust tones, you manage emotions not to express, but to maintain harmony. And harmony in this context often means be small, be agreeable, be easy to love. So you learn authenticity is dangerous, too messy, too raw, too real. You start to split. There is the version of you that performs, smiles, pleases, overfunctions, and there is the version that aches, quietly in the background. The one that cries in silence, the one that wonders always, would anyone still stay if I stopped performing? This split becomes the blueprint of your adult life. You attract people who mirror your childhood conditioning. Love becomes something you earn, not something you're given. Affection becomes a currency, not a connection. And when real love finally knocks, gentle, unpolished, honest, you flinch, you freeze, you question, what do they want? Why aren't they leaving? How long will this last? Because when you've known conditional love for too long, unconditional love doesn't feel like warmth. It feels like exposure. It feels like danger. Unconditional love asks something you've never been taught how to give, your whole self. Not just the neat parts, not just the high-achieving, low-maintenance version, but the messy, scared, complicated, real you. And to be seen in that state, without mask, without filter, without performance, feels like standing naked in a blizzard. It's the death of your survival strategies, the death of the belief that you are only as lovable as you are useful, the death of a self that was never allowed to rest. And death, even when it's of our dysfunction, feels terrifying. So what do? We sabotage. We overthink. We pull away. We choose familiar hurt over unfamiliar healing. Because at least the hurt we know has rules. At least it makes sense. But healing, wholeness, unconditional love, they ask for surrender. They ask for trust. They ask you to put the performance down and believe, even just for a moment, that you were never too much to be loved as you are. Unlearning conditional love is not a quick realization. It is a long, deliberate dismantling. A slow, often agonizing unwinding of beliefs that once shielded you from rejection but now imprison your soul. It demands more than insight. It demands vigilance. Because the conditioning runs deep. It seeps into the smallest choices, how you speak, how you apologize when no apology is needed, how you hold back joy to avoid drawing too much attention, how you hide your sadness to avoid being too much. To unlearn conditional love is to wage a daily rebellion. A rebellion against every script that says you are only as valuable as your performance. You must earn affection through usefulness. You must trade your authenticity for safety. It is noticing the moments you start to mold yourself again. Noticing the way your voice falters. Noticing the way your shoulders tense. Noticing the way you edit your truth before it even leaves your mouth. It is standing in the raw, terrifying space where you choose not to perform, not to shrink, not to betray yourself to keep the peace. And that space will feel brutal at first, because the mind, trained by years of survival, will scream, "Don't do it. Don't be real. Don't risk being abandoned." But here is the deeper truth. You are not trying to win love anymore. You are learning to recognize love that was there all along, the kind of love that doesn't bargain. The kind of love that doesn't ask you to amputate parts of yourself to be palatable. True belonging was never about changing yourself to fit the room. It was always about finding the rooms where your unedited self is welcomed. But trusting this is hard, because conditional love felt like home, even if that home was built on fear, on scarcity, on performance. Choosing real love requires grieving the home you never had. It requires mourning the childhood spaces where love was a reward, not a refuge. It requires building a new home inside yourself, a home where you are allowed to be messy, emotional, unfinished, and still profoundly worthy. And this work is not glamorous. It is not celebrated. It is slow, invisible, and holy. Because each time you stay true to yourself, each time you refuse to shrink, even when it costs you, each time you risk being fully seen, you are laying a new foundation. A foundation where love is not conditional, A foundation where existence itself is enough. A foundation where the question is no longer, how do I earn love? But, how do I honor the love that has always been my birthright? And that is where healing begins. Healing the way you love means healing the way you see yourself. Because if you believe you are only lovable when you are useful, perfect, or compliant, you will seek relationships that mirror that belief. You will gravitate toward those who only love you when you are performing, and you will feel uncomfortable, even suspicious, when someone loves you without conditions. Your external relationships will always reflect your internal relationship with yourself. If you believe you must earn love, you will choose partners who demand you keep earning it. If you believe you are too much, you will be drawn to people who need you to stay small. If you believe you are broken, you will be attracted to those who treat you like a project, not a person. Healing the way you love requires unlearning the belief that you must deserve love. It requires recognizing that you were worthy before you ever accomplished anything. Before you pleased anyone, before you proved anything. It requires realizing that true love is not conditional upon your usefulness, your attractiveness, your perfection. True love is not earned. It is offered. It is received. It is nurtured through presence, honesty, and mutual respect, not manipulation, control, or silent contracts. But to step into this kind of love, you must first step out of the old contracts you signed without knowing. The contracts that said, I'll be quiet if you stay. I'll be easy if you love me. I'll be what you need if you don't leave. You must tear up those contracts. You must reclaim the parts of yourself you silenced to keep others close. You must risk being fully seen, even if it means some people will choose to walk away, because the ones who demand your performance were never offering you love. They were offering you conditional approval dressed up as love, and you deserve more than that. You deserve the kind of love that celebrates your wholeness, not the kind that demands your self-abandonment. True love does not shrink you. It does not shame your needs. It does not punish your complexity. True love expands you. It invites your full presence. It welcomes your contradictions. It holds space for your humanity. And sometimes, the first and hardest act of love is learning to give that kind of love to yourself. To stay present with your own messy emotions, to forgive your own imperfections, to honor your own worthiness, even before anyone else does. Because healing how you love others begins with healing how you love yourself, not as a means to earn belonging, but as a radical declaration that you already belong, here, now, as you are. And from that foundation, you will no longer settle for love that demands your erasure. You will only accept love that nourishes your becoming. Because you will have finally remembered, you were never too much. You were never not enough. You were simply waiting for the kind of love that mirrors back the truth you were born with. You are whole. You are worthy. You are already home. Healing the way you receive love is just as sacred, just as vital as healing the way you give it. Because no matter how openly, how generously, how selflessly you pour love into others, if deep down you still believe you're unworthy of receiving love in return, you will reject it. You will push it away. You will question it until it withers. and you won't even realize you're doing it. You'll call it independence. You'll call it high standards. You'll say, I just need space. But what you're really saying is, I don't know how to let someone care for me without earning it. You've learned to equate being loved with being useful, with being needed, with being good enough. So when someone shows up and offers love freely, no conditions, no checklist, no transaction, your mind goes into revolt. You question their motives. You wait for the catch. You suspect it's a trick, a setup, a temporary kindness with an expiration date. Because when your nervous system has been wired for conditional love, unconditional love feels unsafe. It feels like standing on a cliff with no harness. It feels like exposure. It feels like danger. Receiving love, real love, requires more than an open heart. It requires trust. And not just trust in others, but trust in yourself. A trust in your own worth. Trust that you are lovable, not because of what you do, but in spite of what you think you lack. It means believing that even when you're messy, even when you're unsure, even when you're not meeting anyone's expectations, including your own, you are still worthy of being held. And here's the hardest part. Some people won't stay when you stop performing. Some people will only know how to love your mask. Some people will walk away when they finally meet your real self. Let them. Because their leaving is not the proof that you're unlovable. It's the proof that your healing has begun. You're no longer chasing approval. You're no longer trying to convert conditional love into real love. You're no longer performing for scraps. You are making space for something real. The kind of love that holds space for your humanity, that doesn't require you to shrink, to twist, to earn, to explain. Love that chooses you because of your depth, not in spite of it. To receive that kind of love, you must first believe it's possible, even if you haven't fully experienced it yet, even if it still feels like a foreign language in your mouth. Because sometimes the first act of healing is not speaking love, it's believing that one day you will understand it when it's spoken back to you. Healing your capacity to love and to be loved is not a single flash of insight. It is not a clean break. It is not a one-time awakening after which everything becomes easy. It is a slow, uneven rebuilding. It is the daily, deliberate practice of choosing trust over suspicion, choosing openness over self-protection, choosing vulnerability over control. It is choosing, again and again, to believe that love does not require your perfection, only your presence, only your willingness to stay, only your courage to be seen. It is learning to be held, even when your mind screams that you must earn it. It is sitting inside the unbearable tenderness of being cared for without conditions. It is allowing love to seep into the places you once locked away out of shame. But this choice is not easy, because to love like this, to love freely, without the armor of perfection, means risking everything. It means standing naked before another soul, messy, complicated, unfinished, and trusting that you are still enough. It means extending that same terrifying grace to others who are also stumbling, also scared, also unlearning the same old ghosts. The ghost of abandonment, the ghost of rejection, the ghost of not being enough. Real healing, real connection lives in this messy middle ground, where no one is perfect, where no connection is guaranteed, where love is not a transaction to be earned. but a daily act of choosing. Choosing to stay when it's uncomfortable. Choosing to speak when silence would feel safer. Choosing to forgive when pride demands distance. Because the real cost of freedom, the freedom to love without performance, is the willingness to carry uncertainty, to risk being misunderstood, to risk being left, to risk giving without guarantees. This is the paradox of modern life. We have more choices, more autonomy, more mobility than ever before. And yet, with that freedom comes the heavy, silent burden of radical responsibility. The responsibility to show up fully without the certainty of being met. The responsibility to offer love without the expectation of immediate return. The responsibility to keep your heart open even after it has been bruised. And so you must ask yourself, are you willing to carry the weight of real freedom? Are you willing to love without guarantees? Are you willing to be true, even if it means standing alone, waiting not for perfect love, but for real love, the kind that meets you exactly where you are,